Hey guys, it's Kane here. Welcome to the second part of the DataGrid videos. In this particular video, I'm gonna show you delete, add, and update operations on DataGrid. In a previous video, we already added these items into the DataGrid menu, and as you can see, as I click them, they appear on text boxes. Now we're gonna continue with this example, and we're gonna add a couple of buttons, and each of these buttons will perform an addition, an update, and a delete operation. So we will focus on adding, updating, and deleting data to and from the data grid. So the first thing I'm gonna do to add a new record button, and from there I'm just going to copy paste this button after giving it a name, copy paste it and create the update and delete buttons. Now the add operation will be quite straightforward, and the reason for this is because of how DataGrid behaves. As I described in the previous video, the DataGrid actually has a property called dataSource, which is directly connected to the source that we created. In this example, our source is the binding list, but you can actually use DataGrid to connect it to any kind of source, including an XML file if you want, or a database and so forth. Any kind of table-like structure can be connected to the DataGrid itself. Now that I created these buttons, I'm gonna name them as button add, button delete, and also button update. For the add part, this will be quite straightforward, and the only thing that I'm gonna do in the add part is actually add a new people to the list of the people list. So the binding list will be updated. We're gonna say something like people list.add, and we're gonna add new people with the new ID, name, and surname, whatever they are. You can take these up from the user, basically. So whenever the user enters a new text for the name and surname, this can be basically applied into the data grid. So I'm just going to take the name and the surname from the user, in this case whatever they type to txt name and txt surname. It is also a good idea to basically check these whether or not they are empty, and we're gonna add them using the auto ID. So as we discussed in the previous video, the ID is not something I deliberately add, but it is kind of like an auto ID. So each time we add it, it will increase automatically. Next thing, I'm checking if the name length is greater than 1, and also the same for the surname, just making sure that the user actually typed a name and surname and they didn't leave this empty. It is a terrible idea to leave the fields empty, especially in an add operator, because you are basically expanding the data grid for no purpose. So making sure that the validation is done is crucial in this case. So if the data is not entered, basically I'm showing that please enter name and surname message so that the user will see this. Having done so, now we're gonna focus on adding the actual data. So once they don't enter anything, we'll see the message on the screen that please enter a new name and surname. Once these are added, we're gonna add the new people. So we're gonna modify people list, and we're gonna type something like people list.add new people, and we're gonna put the ID, which is gonna be the auto ID. In this case, our auto ID is 4, and each time we add a new record, we're gonna increase the auto ID. So the auto ID, as I said, gonna increase each time. We're gonna add the name, which is the txt name.text. In this case, we already initialized it to name variable, and the surname variable up there. Now because we have the same name and surname for the new people, this can be confusing, so it's best if you actually give them different names so that you wouldn't mix up which one is which. So I'm gonna change it to username and user surname so that we don't really confuse which one is the data being entered by the user and which one goes to the people list. You can keep them the same as well, but I think this will be a better approach, just especially if you do not have too much experience in this kind of thing. It will be better if you keep your data more organized. Once you have done this, make sure to increase the auto ID as well. And let's test this now. So we finished adding the new person, the people. Basically I'm just gonna type something there, a name and a surname like test and add it, and as you can see the new record is now added. You can keep adding should you want to more data like John Black, adding it, and John Black, the surname is basically didn't change, so we need to go back and fix it, but basically the data is added. So we need to go back and fix the that part, the John and John, it just seems like the surname is username, but we can fix that later. So you got the point. And let's go to the delete part. We have the delete part. The delete part is a bit dodgy, and we need to be a bit careful about it because it will allow us to first detect the delete ID, and using that delete ID will basically delete the relevant component from the data grid. So basically we're going to make a search and find the ID that we want to delete, and from there we're gonna detect which one we want to delete. First thing I basically find in here is that the delete ID str, creating that and finding the value here, which is the selected row, cells, value, and converting to string. You can also use the selected person in this regard, both ways work. And once we have done this, we're going to convert it to actually a number, because when we store the data up there in the people list, this was actually a number, so it's best if we convert it to a number. I am writing this index, but I don't think I need it because I'm gonna do a search, but let's just keep it there in case that I need it. I'm just gonna make a search now for every single record. So on the list, on the people list, to make sure to find the ID matching with the ID that I want to delete. So I'm gonna look for each of these IDs and find the one that matches with the one that I want to delete. You don't need the index value here, so you know, you can delete that part if you don't want to. You can directly use the index to delete it as well, but I think making a search like this is a far reliable way to delete the operation, to complete the delete operation. So looking at each and every value in the people list, so going from 0 up to the people list count, if the people list ID, which is going into every single entry, equals to the ID that I want to delete, I'm gonna perform the delete operation. In this case, people list dot remove people list I. It is also suggested that you encapsulate this with a try and catch, so that you make sure to perform a delete operation. Like this is actually a very good spot to see the difference between if else and try and catch as well. So let's just make sure to complete this statement, and then we'll also refresh the data grid view, and we'll use the try and catch. The try and catch will allow us to make sure that a row is selected basically before we perform a delete operation. So I already wrote the try part, so I'm gonna write the catch part now, and I'll write a message that says make sure to select a row before deleting or something. Now writing that part, just gonna get rid of the warning message. I'm just gonna put get hash code here. It doesn't matter if you put it or not. I just don't want to see any warning, and that is why I'm doing it. Right, basically we completed now more or less how the delete operation will be done. So we don't need the index value. So I'm getting the delete ID, and one by one I'm going through every single record, and if the people list ID is matching with the ID that I want to delete, we can remove that. And the final thing I'm going to do is to basically refresh the my grid view before completing the delete operation. So we can add now, as you can see, and this is added, and we can delete the records. Now when we come to the final record and we try to delete, we will get an error message. This is only because that the selected row is actually null. So you can try to use an if statement here to check the null state of the specific selected row, but this is not gonna work. And this is actually a very good part to understand the difference between try and catch. A lot of people, especially new programmers, assume that essentially a try and catch is the same as an if-else statement, but this is actually not true. Try and catch is specifically used to handle exceptions, particularly in object-oriented languages like C#. It is used to handle the null state of objects, and you can't always do this with if-else. Just because it will trigger the error regardless of whether or not you are checking that state. So I'm just trying to get rid of the null error here, and as you can see, putting it into the try and catch is a better way than trying to handle it with an if else part. So look what I did. It's just a my grid view, selected rows. If it is not null, I'm just basically converting it. But as I try this, you will see that I try to get rid of the records. For the records that are already there, it just doesn't recognize the command anymore. So what we need to do essentially is to basically put any kind of error you would like to get into the try and catch statement rather than trying to handle it with if else. You can see now that I'm trying to use the delete ID str, and it will still cause the same problem. See, it's there. The best approach for this is to make sure that any circumstance that you are likely to have, make sure that it exists inside try and catch, so you handle the error yourself rather than leaving it to the computer. Okay, don't try to handle it with an if else. If you are getting a null exception, make sure that it is inside try and catch, so you catch the error, you do not leave it to the computer. Because when the records are empty, you will still get it, even though it seems like it's working. If you try to delete a record that is not entered, as you can see, the very last row of the data grid is empty. When I try to delete that, it will generate me the error. So the best approach is to go there, copy paste it to the inside try and catch, and get rid of all of this. Make sure that everything exists inside try and catch. This is crucial for us because that way we can handle the error ourselves rather than leaving to the computer to throw a null exception. So I hope the delete part is clear now. So let's test it one more time. So we can go into the delete record. Now when I try to delete the empty record, it says select a valid row to delete. You see, now it works as it intended to be. That is what I wanted to show you with the if else and the try and catch statement. Now the final part is the update. This will be similar to delete with the exception that we're gonna update it, and in this time the index value that we used in the delete that we actually didn't use in the delete, we're gonna use it right now because we were going through every single data in the delete. We didn't need to have the index value, but we will actually use that in the update part. And the reason for this is because that the array logic of DataGrid, so just like list view, just as we have seen in the previous example, it works in the similar fashion. So the first record actually is the record 0. So similar to delete part, I'm gonna copy everything inside try and catch. In case I have an error, at least I'll handle it myself rather than throwing a null error. I'll basically handle the exceptions myself. So the way that we do the update is very similar to how we did it in the delete part. We will still need to get an update ID. So every kind of update and delete operation has to run through an ID. So in order to know which field to which row to update, we need to know the ID. That is because the ID is the primary key or the unique identifier of the row. We are identifying the rows using the ID. So this is their unique non-null element. So it works exactly in the same fashion as in delete. We get the update ID this time and we convert it to the ID that we're going to use to find which fields that we need to update. Now the only difference here is that we're going to find the index value now. Instead of directly saying people list ID dot name, we're going to say index is equals to ID minus 1. So just typing it there, integer index is equals to ID minus 1. This is because of how the array logic works. So it's basically people list starts from people list 0, people list 1, people list 2. Even though your record is the first one, the first record actually is the people list 0. So that is why I put minus 1, because 1 is actually 0. So I put people list 0 dot name, and that will be initialized to the txt name.text. Whatever entered by the user will be initialized to the people list, and the same goes for the surname. And these are the two fields I like to update. So I'm not going to update the ID because I used to identify the fields through ID. One final thing that I need to do is to refresh. Remember that we were refreshing the form in the list view. Now you don't have to do that in the DataGridView. You can directly refresh it. Oops, I got an error. That's the bracket error probably. Somewhere in here, yes, at the end we have a bracket error. So just completing that. Yeah, and now that the application works, we are able to delete the records, as you can see, and now we can add a new record and we can basically update it. The surname one, we had a problem, so we need to basically fix that in the add part, I think. The username and surname, yes, I forgot that part to fix, so I'm just gonna fix that now. So user surname should be the surname should be the user surname. So let's run this again. Jane Honda, we delete that, we can re-add Jane Honda, and now I'm gonna basically use the update part to make sure that the updates are reflected. So we have the cell getting from the update ID, we have the ID itself, we use the index number, and then we update the name and the surname. It has to be converted to string, but you know what, you don't have to do that, you can just leave it as text as well. I think it should work fine now. Let's try. So we are able to delete this, we can re-add it as you can see, and we can now type something else there, test, and I need to basically go through this again. Let's see if we can display a message here just to identify it. The update ID. It's nice that I'm actually getting these errors, so you see how I cope up with the problems here. So in case that you also have problems, the first thing you should do is to make sure that the ID is being taken. So we can get the ID for sure, it's not empty. So do not let yourself be discouraged by the errors that you have. And if I change it to ID, I think it will update the previous not the record that I want, but the record that comes after it, and it does it. So you can see that I click on Jane, but it actually didn't update that one, so I'm going to change it back to index. So I think pretty much this is ready now. I'm just going to run this application and see how it works. So we can update it now. I'm going to put test in there and test into this one as well, and as you can see I can update it. I'm going to change the surname and change it back, and also change this one, update. So you see the update operations are being done. We can add a new record, we can actually delete it, and we can update the records as well. So I'm gonna add new one, and as you can see if I want to delete an empty one, it won't actually delete it. So all three operations are done using the add, update, and delete. So I think we came to the end of this video now. We have seen all operations, add, delete, and update. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take good care.